Hello and welcome to Michael's Minty Music for today. Today we review JJ Scheff's second album, Treasure, which released just a few months ago this February. It is really good for sure. Definitely a really good album here. This is the track listing, and these are the tracks I added to my playlist, 7 out of 9, so most of them here. This album is definitely really good, although a couple of tracks kind of blend together and not in a good way. Most of the tracks here are pretty good, but there are a few that are a little slower and drag a bit. Particularly tracks 2 and 3, as well as the ending tracks 6 and 8, the title track, Treasure. But there are some really great tracks to compensate, particularly in the middle. 2-2 and Tectonics are both great, and the opening and closing tracks are both really well done. The album flows pretty well. It starts off pretty slow and then gets quicker right in the middle before slowing down to the end. So it's kind of a hill which you climb and then go back down to the end, which is pretty interesting. Unfortunately, the sort of opening climb is a bit of a drag. And without the peak of the middle, the back half is actually a little draggy as well. It just kind of works to the end, though. If there were just 1 or 2 more quicker tracks somewhere here on the album, I think it would be almost perfect. The genre is a lot more varied than his first album. A lot more alternative rock instead of the sort of harder stuff he had. Additionally, the more harder rock tracks here are a bit more traditional than his first album. A bit more new wavy and pop-ish. So a bit more variety, a lot more slower stuff on this album, but a bit more variety and better in the areas which he does it, in my opinion. I would say this is a really good album with some clear flaws, which isn't severely harmed by its issues, so it's still really good. My favorite track here is definitely 2-2. It's the most upbeat track here, and it's one of the more traditional, definitely the most listenable out of the context of the album. Some of these work a lot better in the album than they do sort of on their own, and 2-2 is definitely listenable outside of that context. I rank this album better than his first album, Heady, although it's pretty close. Treasure is definitely better in terms of total songs. The quality is essentially the same between the two, but Treasure has a lot more. Heady is perhaps a bit better in terms of flow, but I think that's mostly due to the fact that it has less songs, there's less extra stuff to deal with. Treasure gets a little bit draggy at times, and that's because there's more songs. Which I'd rather have more songs than, having a perfect album that's only 2 tracks. I don't think he massively improved the quality between the 2 albums, but he definitely doesn't get worse, and there's more stuff on this one than the first album, so I think it's better, but not by a ton. Additionally, this album does take my top spot from 2024, this year, so the year's not over, but it takes it from the only other album I've listened to from this year so far, which is Taylor Swift's new album. It's a little close here between Treasure and Tortured Poets Department, but I think Treasure is a lot more interesting. Although the quality between the two, I would say, it's slightly in Taylor Swift's favor since she has a lot more experience. But at the end of the day, there are a handful of other albums that are coming out in 2024 that are all in contention for the top album. So I don't expect this to really stick. So even if it does, I'm pretty comfortable with this album as my favorite, as it's still really good. Next up is INXS's 1992 album, Welcome to Wherever You Are. This is one of my least favorite albums of theirs, but it's still got some interesting songs on it here and there, so stay tuned for that, and as always, stay minty.